Well, we'll talk about him. You'll know who I'm describing and why I'm saying this as soon as I say his name. He's now become a movie actor as well in the soon-to-be-released Murder by Death, and there are a few people who wouldn't mind murdering him, Truman Capote. Truman, sit right down and insult a few people.
And I'll tell you something else about fags, especially Southern fags. Because Southern fags are really mean. When you meet a Southern fag...
Tell us about it. Come on, let's get going.
A Southern fag is meaner than the meanest rattler you ever met.
Marlon Brando is an absolutely marvelous actor.
Yes,
he has incredible instincts. He's got such extraordinary taste and judgment on the whole. But, I mean, he's so dumb it makes your skin crawl.
Joining us for the 10 o'clock news. Novelist Truman Capote was found dead in a Bel Air mansion this afternoon. Capote had been fighting alcoholism. According to Los Angeles police, Capote had been a guest in the Sunset Boulevard home of Joanne Carson, the first wife of entertainer Johnny Carson. Capote had been
critics placed Truman Capote in the very front rank of American writers. His reputation was based on relatively few books, but the works he did produce were, according to the critics, exquisitely crafted.
Hello. Truman Capote's death 2 years ago ended an extraordinary career. In the long term, he may be remembered as the American novelist, short story writer, and social commentator whom Norman Mailer described as the best writer of my generation. His literary achievements include Breakfast at Tiffany's, the charming tale which made Holly Golightly a household name, and In Cold Blood, the chilling, factual account of a mass murder with which Capote pioneered a style he called the non-fiction novel. But in the short term, he'll also be remembered for his public image as a humorous and opinionated celebrity, befriended by the social elite, a regular attraction on television chat shows. Andy Harris' film sets out to investigate the contradictions of Capote's life and the mystery surrounding his last and unfinished novel, Answered Prayers, a savage and controversial expose of the glittering world in which he moved. Capote was born in New Orleans in 1924. Abandoned by his parents, he was raised as an only child in a house full of aging and eccentric Southern cousins. He found comfort at an early age in books.
Well, Truman, from the time he was 5 years old, would lug around this huge Webster's dictionary. It was bigger, really, than he was. He would take this dictionary, and he told me that he was going to memorize the dictionary. He would take it out in the front yard. We had this great big yellow rose, laid a Banksia rose, that rose way in the air, and it made like an umbrella. He would take that dictionary and go out and sit under that tree with that dictionary. With Nell Harper Lee, she would go in and they would study that dictionary. And he used words that were absolutely unreal, because I took him to New Orleans and we went to see a show, and he meant to say grotesque, and he said to me, that was the most grotesque thing I've ever seen. He was always straining to know and use. Truman loved words. He played with words. He lived with words.
Many of Capote's early stories were to be drawn from his childhood in the South, and in particular to center on his relationship with his old cousin, Souk. In the absence of a mother, Souk played a powerful role in shaping the sensibilities and imagination of the young writer. This, a television version of one of Capote's most popular short stories, A Christmas Memory, provides a romanticized but vivid insight into their time together.
Coming of winter morning more than 30 years ago.
Oh, my. Fruitcake, brother.
The person to whom she is speaking is myself. We are cousins, very distant ones, and we have lived together well as long as I can remember. Other people inhabit the house, relatives, and though they have power over us and frequently make us cry, we are not on the whole too much aware of them. We are each other's best friend. She calls me Buddy, in memory of a boy who was formerly her best friend. The other Buddy died in the 1880s when she was still a child. She is still a child.
She would dress Truman up in all these Paisley shawls and things like that, and put hats on his head and all that. And she, I don't know, it was a fantasy. I don't think she knew what she was creating or what she was putting in his mind. I don't say that she put it in his mind, but I think it made an impression on him, and she made him too dainty.
The household emerges. Of course, they'd like to kill us both, but it's Christmas, so they can't.
I began writing really seriously when I was about 11. I say seriously in the sense that, like other kids go home and practice the violin or the piano or whatever. I used to go home from school every day and I would write for about 3 hours. I was obsessed by it.
He told me that he was a writer, you know. I was 13, I don't know how old he was, but he couldn't have been much more, you know. And he was a writer, and I absolutely believed it, because the slant, he came in on a slant. I'd never met anyone like that. And there was also something very sad and moving about him. Always, always.
My major regret in life, I suppose, is that I was an only child, and that my childhood was unnecessarily lonely, and that I did not feel, as a child, very much love or affection or warmth around me.
Capote's first novel, Other Voices, Other Rooms, was published in 1948 to great critical acclaim and considerable controversy. The underlying theme of homosexuality was provocative for its time, as was the picture of the young writer on the back cover.
In that book, he is seeking his father. That is really what he's seeking. And this person that plays the part, he has Randolph in the book, and the man, you see, that's the first thing I think Truman ever wrote about, touched on anything like homosexuality, was when he had Randolph in and explained about Randolph, you know, holding his hand and Randolph wanting him to like him so much, and about this golden-haired boy. Well, that was Truman. The golden-haired boy was Truman.
Capote explored further aspects of his childhood in two more short novels, The Grass Harp and Tree of Night.
He loved an audience. He had to have an audience. I don't care what Truman did, he first got his audience, and then he would go into his spiel. He had a wonderful ability like that.
This woman came over to me, and she had on a pair of slacks and a sort of little pull-up jersey sweater. And so she handed me this felt pen. And she pulled up her little sweater, and she said, "I want you to write your name on my tummy." And I sort of kidded her for a moment, and I said, "Oh, forget it." And she says, "No, really, I want you to write your name on my tummy right there." And these friends that I was with said, "Oh, go on, for gosh sakes, go ahead, do it." So I took this felt pen, and I wrote my name on her tummy like this. And she seemed very happy and took her felt pen, and she went back to the table. Well, in a few minutes, there was this enormous row one of the biggest Mr. and Mrs. you've ever seen going on between this woman and her husband. And this whole place got very quiet, or at least the whole immediate area got very silent and quiet. And suddenly this man got up, and he came over to the table where I was sitting, and he had the felt pen in his hand. And he stood in front of me. Now, you just keep quiet.
Okay.
And he stood in front of me. And he unbuckled his buckle, and he dropped his trousers, and he handed me the felt pen. And he says, since you're on an autographing spree, would you mind autographing this? And so there was this fantastic frozen silence, nobody moving at all, and I thought, gee, I've got to think of something pretty quick here. And so I said, well, listen, maybe I can't autograph it, but perhaps I could initial it.
Capote, the social celebrity, had followed hand in hand with his early success as a writer. It was a combination of skills that he was to maintain all his life. By the early 1950s, he was increasingly to be found at all the best parties, best clubs and restaurants. He defended it as research for a future project, and in part it was. But his private life was a sharp contrast. He'd fallen in love with a fellow author and recluse, Jack Dunphy.
What was he like? Well, he was adorable. Bright. We always lived sort of separately, even when we were very together. For instance, I would go afternoon swim or afternoon wild thing, and he never came with me on those things. So we always gave terrific leeway to one another. When I was with Truman, I felt that I was where I wanted to be. As I say, we always gave one another great freedom. And that way, it wasn't a marriage. Marriage is a prison, I think, anyway. There were no laws. Nothing held us together but our own interest in one another and our own love.
Capote's life was steadied by Dunphy, but he still couldn't resist his love of the high life as provided by his new friends in the American jet set. In particular, people such as broadcasting tycoon Bill Paley and his wife, Babe.
The jet set? Oh, well. I don't think I knew them. And when I did meet them, they would always see to it that they were very unjetty. They would try to so they would make me out that I felt that I was some sort of, Huckleberry Finn or something like that, some horse's ass of a... In other words, they were all kneeling, but it was really curiosity. They wanted to see what this monster was, you see, this so-called recluse and so on. If I was a recluse, I wanted to give them carte blanche to Truman. If they wanted him to have him, let them have him. It was perfectly all right with me. It never put any boils on my ass or anything like that. I had no bumps. Never bothered me like that.
The whole social structure of the sort of Eastern Seaboard elite, so to speak, mostly a bunch of slobs, but nevertheless, he was fascinated by that. He was fascinated somewhat by power and success.
The New York social scene was now a major influence on Capote's writing, reflected first in his brilliant short novel, Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Breakfast, Dad.
Breakfast, Dad.
Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Breakfast at Tiffany's was published in 1958. Its characters, particularly Holly Golightly, bearing more than a passing resemblance to his newfound friends.
Truman was a writer of moods. You could always tell what kind of mood he was in by what he was writing. His early stories were completely loveless, had no love in them, and they were terror, they were dark stories. Then that was one cycle of his life. Then he moved to another cycle of life. When he wrote Breakfast at Tiffany's, that was a happy time in his life.
thing is to pursue excellence in all its forms, right?
Capote now sought a new direction in writing. He wanted to achieve a more simple and direct form of prose, a synthesis of quality journalism with the imagination of a novelist.
There are oysters. You wouldn't want to rob a good oyster, would you?
Marilyn Monroe was one of several celebrities he chose to profile, some kindly like her, some less kindly, like Marlon Brando. But Capote's first major attempt at non-fiction was called The Muses Are Heard, an account of a tour in Russia with an American opera company.
I think he felt that he'd gone as far in fiction as he wanted to go at that stage in his career, and he was looking for something else. And he found writing The Muses Are Heard a very exhilarating experience. And it was a much-discussed piece when it appeared in the New Yorker. And he was looking for another non-fiction project. And specifically, he was looking for a murder.
The murder that Capote was looking for was realized in a most unlikely place, among a tiny farming community in the Midwest of America. It was to provide the basis for his much-planned experiment, combining the skills of good journalism with the form of a novel.
In Cold Blood is the story about the murder of a family in a small town in western Kansas. Mr. Herbert W. Clutter and his wife, Bonnie Clutter, and their 2 teenage children. This was an especially strange and brutal murder in 1959 in which the family was shotgunned to death for no apparent cause or motive whatever. Blood is the story of these 6 people, the Clutters, who died together November 15th, 1959, and Perry Smith and Richard Hickok, who were hanged April 14th, 1965. And my book is the story of their lives and their deaths. It's a completely factual account, and every word in it is true and based on innumerable interviews with the people directly concerned over a period of 5 years. The village of Holcomb stands on the high wheat plains of western Kansas, a lonesome area that other Kansans call out there. Some 70 miles east of the Colorado border, the countryside, with its hard blue skies and desert-clear air, has an atmosphere that is rather more far west than middle west. The local accent is barbed with a prairie twang, a ranch hand nasalness, and the men, many of them, wear narrow frontier trousers, Stetsons, and high-heeled boots with pointed toes. The land is flat, and the views are awesomely extensive. Horses, herds of cattle, a white cluster of grain elevators rising as gracefully as Greek temples are visible long before a traveler reaches them.
Holcomb, too, can be seen from great distances. Not that there is much to see. Simply an aimless congregation of buildings divided in the center by the main line tracks of the Santa Fe Railroad, a haphazard hamlet bounded on the south by a brown stretch of the Arkansas River, on the north by a highway, Route 50, and on the east and west by prairie lands and wheat fields.
I thought the book was very well written, and I also thought that it was very factual. Now, there was naturally a few things in there that might not have occurred, but after all, he was writing a book, and if he'd stuck just to the facts, it would probably been like one of my police reports.
Initially, Capote's interest was confined to detailing the community's reaction to this savage and motiveless murder. But with the arrest of the two boys, he decided to expand the project and include their stories as well.
Dick was very easy to get along with and easy to know because he was like somebody you would meet on a train who would just start up an instant conversation and want to tell you everything that ever happened to him. But Perry was a strange and difficult boy. But for the two, I certainly got, in the end, what I consider closer to him because he was so difficult to get close to.
Capote claimed to have written 6,000 pages of notes before he wrote one word of the book. He sat in the courtroom every day through the trial, noting all the details he needed, including little drawings of both the boys and the jurors.
Mercy for them. The killers. How fortunate that their admirable attorneys were not present at the Clutter home that fateful evening. How very fortunate for them that they were not there to plead mercy for the doomed family. Gentlemen, 4 of your neighbors were slaughtered like hogs in a pen by them.
Dick and Perry were transferred to death row in Kansas prison to await their execution, and Capote became their only real contact with the outside world.
I used to visit them in death row there about every 3 months, and they both used to write me twice a week, which was as much as the prison officials would allow them to write. If one said something and the other said it, I knew it was true because they had no way of communicating. And both of them told me about picking up this little boy and his grandfather who was dying in Texas, and how they picked up all these Coke bottles and ginger ale bottles and cashed them in. And the moment they told it to me, it intrigued me terrifically.
But there weren't 3 cents a bottle.
So?
Well, mister, if you was to drive real slow, we could pick us up some real change. That's what Johnny and me been eating off of. Refund money.
Kid, get in. We finally found it. The sunken treasure of Captain Cortez. 3 cents a bottle.
The kid had an honest-to-God genius for spotting amid the roadside rocks and grassy rubble, and the brown glow of thrown-away beer bottles, the emerald daubs that had once held 7-Up and Canada Dry. Perry soon developed his own personal gift for spying out bottles. It was all pretty silly, just kid stuff. Nevertheless, the gang generated a treasure hunt excitement, and presently he too succumbed to the fun, the fervor of this quest for refundable empties. Dick too, but Dick was in dead earnest. Screwy as it seemed, maybe this was a way to make some money, or at any rate a few bucks. Lord knows he and Perry could use them. Their combined finances amounted at the moment to less than $5.
He had a lot of ups and downs with it, and investigating things, checking this, and so on and so forth. And then he told me so many things about the towns out there, the town people out there in Kansas. So I got to know them. So I got to know them. I felt I knew them. And in the book, which he read to me, page by page. So I was so in that book that way, you know.
Capote had retreated with Jack Dunphy to Switzerland to write the book, an agonizing task, and at this stage, a book without an ending.
We corresponded quite a bit through those 6 years. Some of his letters became depressing. He was just about at his wit's end because he was so anxious for the case to end, that is, the conviction to be given. And the murderers kept appealing, as Alvin can so well tell you. How many courts did it go to, honey?
I don't know how many, but it went to the United States Supreme Court 3 times.
And every time that they appealed it, of course, that postponed the decision of the conviction. And it isn't that Truman wanted them to be hanged. He had to know what the conclusion was before he could complete his book, naturally.
Hi, Denny.
Hi, Andrew.
Coming up to the last book show for the year.
Yes, we are.
People will be looking for books to buy and books to give away as presents.
Well, we'll give it to them. We'll have a show called Books Galore. What about that? Join us on Books Galore. Great, eh?
Good.
The last book show of the year, Wednesday at 8 on SBS.
Sunday night, a film of extraordinary power and harsh beauty. Yol.
Ben evlenemem. Arkada dul bir avrat bırakmak istemiyorum.
The last film to be written and directed from prison by Yilmaz Güney. It is a trek into the political, cultural and historical soul of a nation.
Elini öpmeme izin ver.
The deeply felt and often harrowing portrait of contemporary Turkish life as seen through the eyes of 5 men on leave from prison. Their journey across Turkey is filled with confrontation and bitterness.
Elimi vurmayacağım. Sen Allah'ından bulacaksın.
Senden dileğim beni başkasının eline teslim etme. Layığımı sen ver.
A harsh road that leads them to discover the ultimate truths of their existence as men within Turkish culture. Yol, David Stratton's movie of the week, Sunday night, 8:30, SBS.
G'day! With 156 million sheep in Australia, we need more individuals. People who can make this country a little beauty, who can think, feel, act, and speak for themselves. So don't be another sheepish Australian. Express yourself. I see it, but I don't believe it.
On Wednesday, the final chapter of Colette, breaking the ties that bind.
Pas écrire un livre sans qu'il soit question d'amour, de collage incestueux et de rupture. Que veux-tu?
Oui, parce que dans ma vie, il n'y a pas autre chose. Et si dans ma vie, il n'y a plus d'amour, eh bien on passe à la rupture.
She finds a freedom to live.
Ce qui m'intéresse, c'est d'avoir une vie, la mienne.
She finds a freedom to love.
Tu pourrais vivre sans moi?
Free at last.
Oui, mon petit, je pourrais vivre sans toi.
Colette, 8:30 Wednesday, SBS.
Much of Capote's difficulty in completing the book centered on the strong emotions he had for Perry.
We became very close to and very intimate, sort of intense sort of friendship. I don't know if friendship's exactly the word, but some kind of very intense relationship having to do with his total loneliness and my my sort of feelings of pity for him and even a kind of affection.
Still waters, the restorer of my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil.
There's God in this place, too.
My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Finally, Truman reappeared in a state of collapse, and he was crying. And we then got back into the cars and went back to the Mulebach and got on the plane the next morning, and Truman cried all the way back to New York. And I just sat there next to him and held his hand, and he cried. He didn't say anything, he just cried.
I really think you've written a masterpiece here.
Thank you. You'll get a much better dedication. You said that sweet thing.
But when he finished the very last page, we were sitting up by ourselves there. I broke into tears. Oh.
He produced an absolutely extraordinary piece of work. And after all, journalism is a work of imagination, isn't it? It's certainly the way that book is arranged. In fact, Truman himself spoke of it as being a non-fiction novel. He used many of the techniques of imagination in organization and in description and in pacing and in flashbacks. A lot of the devices are in there, and they're used with that incredible skill that he has as a novelist, as a storyteller.
Capote celebrated in great style. Intoxicated with the extraordinary success of In Cold Blood, he decided to hold what was described as the party of the decade at New York's Plaza Hotel. It was called the Black and White Ball. The guest list included the elite, America's rich and famous.
Why was he holding her hand when he's supposed to?
It was a very glamorous party, my goodness. It was one of the great parties of after World War II. Everybody wanted to meet him. He was lionized by people, and he was on top of the wave.
I don't think we stood out as saying Kansas. I don't think we had it written across us, but somehow or another, people recognized that we were not New Yorkers and hadn't seen us around, no doubt. And they came over and talked and introduced themselves, and everyone seemed just real pleased to see us, and we were happy to see them.
Capote truly was on top of the wave, and he was never again to achieve a better balance between his fame and fortune as a writer and his success as a social celebrity. Writing now took second place, as he enjoyed the benefits of his status. and he even bought an apartment in the exclusive UN Plaza with Robert Kennedy and Johnny Carson as neighbors.
He was really on top of his game, there's no doubt about it. He was beginning to think about answered prayers. He began to start talking about it as a book. So at that time, he was quite a figure. And, you know, he knew everybody. Everybody knew him. Jackie Kennedy was a good friend. Lee Radswell was a very good friend at that time. And he was living a rather elegant life.
Come in.
By the early 1970s, Capote was spending more and more time in such wealthy hideaways as Palm Springs and Beverly Hills. The inhabitants of the jet-set world were the subject of his much-planned follow-up to In Cold Blood. It was to be called Answered Prayers.
All the time that I was writing this book, Answered Prayers, I was a fairly invisible person looking at the people that I wanted to look at. It was because I was doing what really amounted to a kind of sociological piece of research.
A first glimpse of the type of material that Capote was working on came in an article he published called Blind Items. It was a scurrilous collection of high society tales, a crude prototype for what he was finally to publish in 4 separate editions of Esquire in 1975. Answered Prayers had been culled from 20 years of Capote eavesdropping in the corridors of the rich and famous. When it appeared, and in particular the chapter set in a New York restaurant called La Côte Basque, there was an outcry.
There is no doubt that, to me anyway, that his view of himself in relation to all these people who he had surrounded himself with, these famous rich people, always was that he was at least their equal, and probably better than they were. And sooner or later, that had to come out. Sooner or later, he had to actually enforce that view. Unfortunately, it came out at a time when he wasn't at the top of his form, and it came out in something like Côte Basque, but it had to come out. It really was his way of saying, look, as I think Liz Smith said in an article she wrote after Côte Basque, I am not your court jester, I am a writer. I've always been a writer. What the hell did you think I was doing around here?
La Côte Basque is on East 55th Street, directly across from the St. Regis. It was the site of the original Le Pavillon, founded in 1940 by the honorable restaurateur Henri Soulet. Like Côte Basque, the original pavilion consisted of a small entrance area, a bar to the left of this, and in the rear, through the archway, a large red plush dining room. The bar and main room formed an outer Hebrides, an Elba, to which Soulet exiled second-class patrons. Preferred clients, selected by the proprietor with an unerring snobisme, were placed in the baquette-lined entrance area, a practice pursued by every New York restaurant of established chic.
This excerpt from La Côte Basque was specially dramatized for the program. Capote himself appears as the narrator, calling himself P.B. Jones.
Lady Ina, of course, was allotted an impeccable table, the 4th table on the left as you enter. She was escorted to it by none other than Monsieur Soulet, distrait as ever, pink and glazed like a marzipan pig.
And today we have on the wagon a very nice salad of lamb.
I think not anything off the wagon. It arrives too quickly. Let's have something that takes forever so we can get drunk and disorderly. Say, soufflé Furstenberg? Could you do that, Monsieur Soulet?
Furstenberg is a great nuisance. Hmm? An uproar.
An uproar is exactly what I want.
Et à boire, qu'est-ce que vous voulez boire?
Oh, why not make this a proper reunion? Let's have a bottle of Roederer's Crystal.
Even for those who dislike champagne, myself among them, there are 2 champagnes one can't refuse. Dom Perignon and the even superior Cristal, which is bottled in a natural-colored glass that displays its pale blaze, a chilled fire of such prickly dryness that, swallowed, seems not to have been swallowed at all.
Of course, champagne does have one serious drawback, swilled as a regular thing. A certain sourness settles in the tummy, and the result is permanent bad breath. Really incurable. Remember Arturo's breath? Bless his heart. And Cole adored champagne. God, I miss Cole so, dotty as he was in those last years. Did I ever tell you the story about Cole and the stud wine steward? I can't remember quite where he worked. He was Italian, so it couldn't have been here or Pat. The Colony? Odd. I can see him clearly, a nut brown man, beautifully flat, with oiled hair, and the sexiest jawline, but I can't see where I see him. He was a Southern Italian, so they called him Dixie. And Teddy Blackstone got knocked up by him. Bill Blackstone aborted her himself under the impression that it was his doing. Perhaps it was in quite another context, but I think it rather dowdy. Unnatural, if you will. A doctor aborting his own wife. Teddy Blackstone wasn't alone. There was a queue of gals greasing Dixie's palm with billet doux. Cole's approach was creative. He invited Dixie to his flat under the pretext of getting advice on the laying in of a new wine cellar. Cole, who knew more about wine than that Dixie ever did. So they were sitting there on the couch, lovely suede one Billy Baldwin made for Cole, all very relaxed. And Cole kisses this fellow on the cheek, and Dixie grins and says, "That'll cost you $500, Mr. Porter." Well, Cole just laughs and squeezes Dixie's leg. "Now that'll cost you $1,000, Mr. Porter." Well, Cole realized this piece of pizza was serious, so he unzippered him, hauled it out, shook it, and said, "What would be the full price on the use of that?" Dixie told him $2,000. Cole went straight to his desk, wrote a check, and handed it to him. And he said, "Miss Otis regrets she's unable to lunch today. Now get out."
When he published this piece describing a luncheon in a French restaurant in New York, La Côte Basque, he had all these real-life people in it, and he told all these terrible stories. They thought they were terrible. They were probably all absolutely true.
I am using real people in the book. There's no question about that. It is a roman entre.
It poses as a novel, though. I mean, it would be on the fiction
yes, of
shelf,
course.
wouldn't
Oh,
it?
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fiction, but there's damn little fiction in it.
Do you know what I did, Maureen? Baroque as I was, I went out and hired myself a personal maid. My fortunes rose, my outlook changed completely. I felt loved and pampered. So if I were you, Maureen, I'd go into Hock and hire some very expensive creature to run my bath and turn down the bed. Incidentally, did you go to the Logans' party?
For an hour.
How was it?
Oh, marvelous. If you've never been to a party before.
I wanted to go, but you know Alan. I never imagined I'd marry an actor. Well, marry, perhaps, but not for love. Yet here I've been stuck with Alan all these years, and it makes me curdle if I see his eyes stray a fraction. Have you seen this new Swedish bitch called Karen something?
Isn't she in some spy picture?
Exactly. Lovely face. Divine photograph from the bazooms up. But the legs are strictly redwood forest. Absolute tree trunks. Anyway, we met her at the Widmarks. And she was moving her eyes around and making all these little noises for Alan's benefit. And I stood it for as long as I could. But when I heard Alan say, "How old are you, Karen?" I said, "For God's sake, Alan, why don't you chop off her legs and read the rings?"
Oh, Carol, you didn't.
You know you can always count on me.
And she heard you.
Wouldn't have been very interesting if she hadn't.
He wrote about what he knew, which is what their people always tell writers to do. But he just didn't wait till they were all dead to do it. And it was really considered, just beyond the pale. I mean, he was a beast, and it was as if he had slapped the queen.
A writer has only their own experience to work from. They have nothing else. That's all Proust had. When he wrote A Remembrance of Things Past, he wrote about his friends in Paris, his relationships with them. He could never have written the book if he hadn't written about his friends and what he knew about, etc.
He thought he was going to get away with this. He was going to be the one who could tell the truth and get away with it because it was art, and he was an artist. And didn't work out that way. These people in New York are very unforgiving.
Everybody knew I was doing this book. Everybody knew it. Everybody knew what kind of a book it was, and there was no mystery there. I was not pretending or camouflaging anything at all. If you take your chances, you take your chances. That's it.
Did you ever know Rosita Winston? Nice woman. Half Cherokee, I believe. She had a stroke some years ago, and now she can't speak. Or rather, she can say just one word. That very often happens after a stroke. One is left with one word out of all the words one has known. Rosita's word is beautiful. Very appropriate, since Rosita has always loved beautiful things. What reminded me of it is old Joe Kennedy. He, too, has been left with one word, and his word is God damn it. Have I ever told you about the time he assaulted me when I was 18 and a guest in his house?
Again, my eye coasted the length of the room, catching en passant a blue-bearded 7th Avenue brasserie hustler trying to con a closet queen editor from the New York Times. Seated near them was a pair unknown to me, a woman of 40, 45, no beauty, but very handsomely set up inside a brown Chanel suit with a brooch composed of cinnamon-colored diamonds fixed to the lapel. Her companion was much younger, 20, 22, a hearty, sun-browned statue who looked as if he might have spent the summer sailing across the Atlantic. Her son? But no, because he lit a cigarette and passed it to her, and their hands touched significantly. Then they were holding hands.
The old bugger slipped into my bedroom. It was about 6 o'clock in the morning, the ideal hour if you want to catch someone really slugged out, really by complete surprise. And when I woke up, he was already between the sheets, with one hand over my mouth and the other all over the place. The sheer ballsy gall of it right there in his own house with a whole family sleeping all around us. But all those Kennedy men are... Still, you have to give the old guy credit. And when he saw I wasn't going to scream, he was so grateful.
But they were not conversing, the older woman and the young seafarer. They held hands, and then he smiled. And presently she smiled, too.
Afterward, can you imagine? He pretended nothing had happened. There was never a wink or a nod, just the good old daddy of my schoolgirl chum. It was uncanny and rather cruel. After all, he's had me, and I'd even pretended to enjoy it. It should have been some sentimental acknowledgement, a bauble, a cigarette box. Do you know that story?
No, but I can see there has to be one.
There's the most marvelous auction at Park Bernay this afternoon. Gothic tapestries.
What the fuck would I do with a Gothic tapestry?
I thought they might be amusing for picnics at the beach. You know, spread them on the sands.
This was something I had worked all my life to be able to do. I have done it.
What have you done?
I've written a very extraordinary book.
He was at the point then when he was flexing his muscles. He wanted them to swallow it. That would be the real test of his own power as a writer, that these rich and famous people would swallow this. Grumble, but swallow it.
The moment I began to publish this book, I felt as though I jumped off a cliff.
Into what?
A form of suicide.
When Truman got the rejection from it, I mean, it was like a child who'd been slapped and not knowing why. I mean, he was just in shock. And it was first shock, then hurt, and anger.
He was particularly angry with Jackie Kennedy's sister, Lee, Princess Lee Radziwill, a long-term friend who'd now broken off all contact with him. Capote lashed out at what he considered such disloyalty.
And this lady, you know, she calls herself a princess. Of course, I always thought that a princess was the daughter of a king and a queen, you know, but she's not. But nevertheless, she calls herself Princess Lee Radziwill. That's her name. Well, I know she wouldn't want me telling you any of these things, but I just can't resist it somehow, because it's just in my blood. Now, you remember the other day she was going to marry this nice gentleman in San Francisco called Mr. Newton Cope? Oh, wasn't that something? And she didn't show up for the wedding?
Another, and perhaps the most important of his close friends who deserted him, was Babe Paley.
I mean, he loved her dearly. And he was terribly hurt by that. I mean, that was the one friendship that he lost that totally shattered him.
Actually, the truth is, I only lost 3 friends as a result of as much of the book has been published so far. I don't guarantee what's going to happen later.
Defiant but depressed, Capote found a new circle of friends in New York's nightlife, among the Warhol set. No longer living with Jack Dunphy, a series of unhappy love affairs added to his problems, and Capote turned to drugs and drink.
It then became a series of scrapes and problems, mostly dealing with things that happened to him when he was drinking and taking drugs a lot. And then it became a matter of trying to get him to get help, which became a major, major fugue in our lives together.
And people thought that I had some kind of a drinking problem, but I didn't. I had a very serious problem of these tranquilizers, and I could not stop taking, because if I did, my whole nervous system just went,
In the final analysis, you can't, as anybody who's been through Alcoholics Anonymous, and he tried that, but people have told me these things, you can't make a person cure himself of this. He's got to go down to the bottom and then come up, and Truman just didn't come up.
My life is so strange. It's not like anybody.
No, I'm sure of that. The little man has lived a big life, am I right?
I don't think it's even like that. I think it's just... I don't know, I just have known a tremendous amount of people, you know, and whatnot, and I'd say on the whole, I get about maybe 9 or 10 invitations every day.
Truman, can I ask you a question? How are you feeling now? How do you feel? Do you feel all right?
Yeah, I feel all right.
Would you rather continue this some other time? It's hot under these lights. We know you haven't been to sleep.
Doesn't bother me at all. I'm perfectly fine.
Can I ask you some serious questions?
Sure, you can go right in. I feel perfectly fine.
Have you been drinking?
You mean very lately?
Despite the battle against pills and booze, Capote did produce a remarkable collection of short stories in 1979. It was called Music for Chameleons, and it included another outstanding example of non-fiction writing, again a crime in the Midwest. He called it Hand-Carved Coffins. Work on answered prayers, though, appeared to have stopped. No more had appeared, and no one knew whether or not he was still writing it.
Are you writing now? Are you continuing to write your book, Answered Prayers? Or are you at a...
Yeah, it's almost finished.
You're almost finished. Then what is the anxiety about how it's going to be received?
I couldn't care less. I mean, I don't know. There's some people that really care, you know, about what's going to happen, about a book of theirs or something, but I always know.
There were lots of chapters. Those names I can still recall. He was very good on titles. There was one chapter called Yachts and Things. There was another called And Audrey Wilder Sang. There was another called A Severe Insult to the Brain, which is part of the medical definition of alcoholism.
I know there were 3 chapters because he read them to me in a period from about 1980 to 83. And they were finished chapters. And because of the title of them, I know he had been working on them out here. And Truman would not read anything to anybody unless it was finished to his satisfaction.
And he used to talk about those chapters in very, very vivid terms, even giving you lines of dialogue. So I believed absolutely that they existed, and I would say, well, when am I going to see it? And he'd say, I'll send it to you tomorrow. And then I would never get it.
Truman, who had once said to me that they were in a very, very safe place, I think he's put them in a safe deposit box somewhere. Because I said, well, Truman, where are they? So if somebody needs them, we know where they are. He said, don't worry. They will appear when they need to.
The further chapters of answered prayers, if indeed he completed them, have never been found. Their fate remains a mystery.
And the funny thing was, my God, here's everybody in New York tearing out bureau drawers, tearing out the backs of cars, looking for this thing. And one day I was on television in Charlotte, and I just said out of a clear blue sky, they said, well, what happened to answered prayers? I said, Truman tore it up. There is no answered prayers. Well, my God, the minute I said that, it was like a bombshell. I thought they knew there was no answered prayers. There is no answered prayers. They can forget that. I know he told me the truth about that because I know what a thinker he is. He never wrote it. There it is.
If he did con me, us, all of us, it was a masterful job. I don't feel angry about it. If we were conned, I feel very, very sad for him. He must have been going through torture.
When he knew it was slipping away from him, when he couldn't embroider about it anymore, when he couldn't make people believe that he actually was producing, when he realized that that was out of hand, I think it was all over for him. It's not a writer's block. It's almost, you know, sort of, my life is over. I have done what in that life makes me me, and I can't do it anymore.
You don't think he wrote the rest of Answered Prayers?
No.
What was he doing?
Nothing.
Why not?
I couldn't. It was over.
I think that I've written one masterpiece in cold blood. That is a masterpiece. I don't care what any detractor has to say about it. It is a masterpiece. The single perfect piece of reportage ever produced in this country or anywhere else, and is widely copied. I invented it. I've written 8 or 9 short stories. Certainly one called A Christmas Memory is as good as any short story I know in the English language. I think I'm a great stylist. I'm a terrifically serious artist. I work very hard. And I don't give a damn at all what anybody has to say about this book. Maybe it'll be boom like this, but not 50 years from now.